Hello and welcome to the Round Ball Australia podcast. My name is Lachlan Avil, joined just by Christian Montegan today. Christian, it's been a fascinating round. You look at the ladder at the end of the weekend and you hear all the lines that people say about one of the closest and one of the most competitive leagues in the world. The Newcastle Jets and Melbourne Victory on the bottom of the table, both getting wins this week, brings them up to 8 points. And it brings, I think it's a collection of 8 teams or so within 2 points. So theoretically, if Victory get a win in the derby next Saturday night, they could go from 12th to as high as 5th on the ladder. I know it's still kind of early in the season, but even after 8 rounds, that's kind of new levels of parity we're seeing here.
Yeah, didn't quite get my dream case scenario. I think I had the top 6 teams to be within 3 points of each other. That would have been the best possible case if you wanted a close table, but didn't quite happen. I think we're 8 point gap between Sydney in first and Adelaide in 6, a 9 point gap. So it's still, I guess, a fair margin. But as you said, like, teams can jump multiple spots, right? And like you said, it's still early days, but just to have that competition, right? It's not like, you've got a couple of dud teams that are easy beats, because Victory, we know obviously they've had their struggles, but they showcased against Adelaide, which we'll touch on later, that they're obviously still in the fight. And again, if Arthur Dillis can try and turn things around there, which hopefully for their sake that game hopefully leads them to do so, then we've got a very, very even competition. It already is, with or without Victory. I mean, there's just so many teams in there who can really put up a good fight and beat some of these top teams like Auckland and Sydney. So yeah, shaping up to be a really tight race.
So Melbourne Victory then, let's kick off with them in the original rivalry win, of course, 2-1 against Adelaide United on Saturday night at Amy Park. The narrative kind of all the way through has been very focused on really the two most impressive people last night, which were Arthur Dillis and Nikos Vergos. It obviously comes with goals and it comes with wins and it goes with losses and not scoring goals. That's just kind of the way football goes, right? But a brace for Nikos Vergos back in the team after, I think, 3 weeks out, with Jing Reese starting up top. Arthur Dillis pulling the pin and saying, no, we need our big money striker back in the mix. And Vergos scores his goals. Dillis looks like a genius. Obviously, again, it's one game here and there. I'm curious as to how much you read into this result.
I mean, it's a win, and they've struggled for those, right? So you have to take them as you come, and to try and build that confidence and momentum, you take any win. And obviously, being an original rivalry, it's one of the marquee matchups of the season for Victory, along with the Big Blue and obviously the Melbourne Derby itself, which would be this coming week when the podcast releases. So for Victory, obviously you take it against Adelaide. Not obviously the best opposition. You're going to have, tougher fish to fry. But in saying that, you have to start from somewhere, right? And had Dillis have lost this game, who knows? He probably would have been out the door. We've been saying that for weeks. It's like, when is it going to happen? So I think Dillis is trying to bide his time and just try and get the pieces sorted. It's like a jigsaw puzzle where he's got so much talent, but he just can't quite seem to fit it all in one. And I think he's been able to find a couple of those pieces on Saturday night against Adelaide, and one of those being, as you mentioned, Nikos Vergos, who started his first game of the season. I think a few Victory supporters have been crying out.
He started, I think, when you were away. He started the first 2 or 3 rounds, but then Reese came in and...
I think someone might have mentioned it on the commentary team, or I heard it somewhere that it was his first start of the season. So unless I missed that while I was away overseas.
I'll do some recon, but keep talking.
And he started a couple. But I think he's such an integral part of a true number 9 who can get you those goals. He's one of those strikers who, yes, needs the service, and he got that against Adelaide. His movement was great, playing off the shoulder of the last man. And he's one of those goal poachers as well, where when he's inside the 18-yard box, 12-yard area, he can, put those goals away, right? And that's what Victory need. Just those couple of moments where, there's clinical finishes. I mean, they went, 6.5 hours without scoring before the Adelaide game?
Yeah,
like, that is
crazy.
Dire, right? You need someone to be putting goals in the back of the net. I don't think it's like they haven't been creating chances. That hasn't been the problem. It's about who can put those in the back of the net. And finally, you got someone like Vergos, who now Dillis might turn around and say, hey, okay, you're my guy. Can you keep this up for me? So I think that's one of the pieces sorted for him. But obviously, it's those problems that the Victory have been facing for weeks now. It's not going to be solved over just one game. So yeah, it's still going to take a bit of time, but at least you've got this win now to say, okay, boys, let's try and build on this momentum.
Yep. The puzzle pieces is a good point because I think there's a number of things in actually the personnel and how they're used that is probably really pivotal to how Victory operate. And Nikos Vergos, I've looked at his flash score. So he started the first 4 games from Auckland on opening night all the way up to the derby. And then he got dropped and he's come off the bench for half an hour or less in the 3 games since. So I think, and look, I said this on the podcast 3 or 4 weeks ago. I'm not sure if you were back by then, but he has the attributes to be a good striker. I know he hasn't put the goals away, but he has the attributes there. And especially when you're making the comparison between him and Jing Reese, who, to be fair to him, he puts in a hard shift and off the ball, he chases hard and he creates turnovers. But just on the ball, he just doesn't quite look at up to that A-League level. So I think Nikos Vergos just has to start every game. And maybe for Dillis, there was an element of just, if Nikos hasn't scored in his first 4 goals, in the cup, maybe a few more as well, then giving Reese a couple of starts is just the reminder that you've got some competition, right? And you've got to fight for it and you're not going to get automatically picked, which of course last season with Bruno, they had a good dynamic that they could rotate those two between each other depending on who was playing well. But I think Vergos is a starter. Obviously Nishan Volupale comes into the team for his first start of the season. Maybe that was the commentary.
Sorry, I got them mixed up. Sorry. Yeah, I'm thinking Vergos started those first few games was Nish. Yep, sorry, my bad.
Yeah, so obviously Nish has been working back from injury. He looked really good. Even when he came on last week for that half an hour or whatever it was against MacArthur, I think he was the best player for Melbourne Victory and he only played like a third of the match. And his impact was instant in the start of the game. I really liked his link up with Matter, actually. There were times where they would pass the ball between each other like 3 or 4 times in a row in those kind of like close spaces. It kind of felt like what Zinedine Mishash and Daniel Arzani were doing last season, just with that interplay. So that looks really good. And then in the midfield, I find the balance really interesting. And maybe this is a blessing of disguise because it's come up kind of naturally. Denny Jonro getting his red card in Brisbane and missing 3 matches. What it's forced Dillis to do is obviously not play Jonro, but with Mata proving himself more than fit and able to play in that 10 for, large portions of games, maybe yes, come off for the last 20 or 30 minutes. That midfield base of Jordi Valadon and Louis Dorigo actually looks really solid. And I think it's stiff for Jonro when he becomes available again because as good as he is, and he is a quality player, we saw that in the first 4 games of the season, he's not your number 1 10 ahead of Juan Mata. And he's not as suited for those defensive responsibilities as Louis Dorigo or Jordi Valadon. So I think it's stiff, but I think they look more balanced when he's not playing. And I also found it fascinating as well. I don't know if you noticed this in the ground, but in terms of the original rivalry as a fixture and being passionate about it, Louis Dorigo was one of the most animated players on the whole pitch on Saturday night, yet he was the one that's come across, not directly, of course, but he's played for Adelaide. He's played on the other half of this rivalry, but it seemed to, mean more to him than most out there on Saturday.
Sometimes you get that, right, when you've played for both sides. It's sort of like you've got a point to prove, in a sense. I'm not too sure about how the transfer sort of happened. I think Jake could probably touch on a bit more as to how he made that move to Victory with his past history with Adelaide. But yeah, you could tell he knew what the rivalry meant. On the pitch, his actions, just even being a leader, like just showing people the way. And I think he's built this, in this game, especially the chemistry with Valadon, where it's been missing, right? Since Ryan Teager's left in the off season. I think that was one of the big questions, right? Who would partner Valadon and build that good relationship and chemistry? And I think so far, I know, again, it's still early days, but to have that option for Dillis, it gives him good headaches, which Dillis had last season as well. For example, who did he play at number 9, Vergos or Fornaroli? He had to, he chose Fornaroli for, the past few games heading into the finals. It's those good headaches that you want as a coach, right? And you mentioned as well, Jean Rowe is another one when he comes back, because for me personally, I like him more in the 10 role, but Mata, that performance against Adelaide, it's like, how can you drop him? Yes, he's old. He's going to be getting his rest. He'll be rotated a bit. Jean Rowe will get his opportunities, but again, it's like, where do you fit him? And it's another piece of the puzzle where Dillis has to figure out, okay, where do I put this guy? Because he's got talent. I think Jean Rowe has done really good in his first few games before he got the silly red card. So again, when you do something needless like that. It presents other opportunities for squad members to, put their hand up and say, okay, this is going to be my role now. You're going to have to, work double as hard in training to get it off me. And so far, Mate has done, I think, really well in that role, just behind the striker, whether it be Vergos or Jing Reese. And again, the point you made as well on Reese, yes, he works hard, but on the ball, in terms of that final end product, the scoring efficiency, it's just not there, right? Vergos is just a completely different player, and it sort of reminds me of a bit like the Socceroos, where we've been having endless discussions about Mitch Duke and his work rate, how tirelessly he works, and that all that is great, but if you can't put the ball in the back of the net, then that's a problem in itself, right? You need that number 9 who, at the end of the day, can win you games of football. And that's what Vergos did against Adelaide. So that's crucial for Dillis, because you can't keep going with 0-0 draw, 6.5 hours without scoring a goal. That just can't continue if you want to save your job. So I think he learned a lot of lessons. He learned a lot of things from that game against the Reds, and hopefully now he can push forward and see for this upcoming fixture in the Derby, which is another big game. It's interesting to see how he sets his team up now, whether he sort of sticks with that same approach.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. I think you're bang on with genre and matter. I hope what Dillis is going to do is it'll be a matter of, pun not intended, playing Juan maybe 70% of the time and giving Jean-Ro the other starts. Maybe when the fixture over the summer gets a bit warmer and the fixture is a bit more congested, just allow Matter to sit out a game here or there and it becomes a one-on-one switch. It was also tricky because, which will happen for sure. And it was tricky because Dorigo came into the start of the season injured as well. So it looked like a very reasonable solution. And I even, asked to see Jean-Ro in the 6 at the start of the season. I think it's just clear that it looks better with Louis in there. And Dorigo is a fascinating case because he's in that bracket, a bit more big picture now, of that kind of 23 to 27-year-old Australian player who's gone over to Europe. He's had 2 years in Poland, wasn't getting the minutes he wanted in Europe, and now he's come back to the league. And I know there's a very big tendency for people to view that as you failed in Europe, you didn't take the next step, you're coming back home to Australia, and that is seen as a mark of failure, right? But I can't help but see it as a positive. If you're getting all these Australians moving overseas like we're seeing in the last 2 to 3 years, a percentage of them are going to come back. That's just going to happen. But the more people we send, the bigger those percentage groups are. So yes, more people are going to come back, but more people are going to kick on as well. And it's just a different pathway for him. And I think if you look back on the history of the A-League and, the kind of age profile of that Australian player that's played overseas and coming back, they used to be 32, 33, 34 years old. But if it's someone like a Louis Dorigo who's had that go in Europe, knows what he needs to do to get back there, if we get him between the ages of 24, 28 in the A-League as he's kind of approaching the peak of his powers, I think that's great for the league.
Sometimes players like that just move too early, too prematurely, and they're not ready for that big move, and they come back to Australia and it reminds themselves that they have to grow even more, right? And not every player is going to be perfect and be good enough to start in the first team, wherever it may be across Europe or wherever they end up in Asia or Japan, wherever the case may be. But it just goes to show how difficult it is, right? It's one thing signing for a club in Europe, right? That's already a big milestone in itself. But be able to break into the first team and avoid, playing for the reserves, which we've seen a couple of instances with the Aussies, going abroad, which have been like, okay, is this really the best in terms of his development? Probably not. So would you rather that, or would you rather further develop yourself in the A-League again? And people see it as a bad thing when you go back to Australia, because it's like, okay, you're starting back from square one. Like, what are you doing here? A bit like Izani, right, where he had all the talent and it didn't work out at Celtic. He's back in Australia, people are like, oh, he's a failure. But again, he proved back in the A-League that he's got so much potential. It's just about finding that right club, which can at times be difficult. Once you get that offer, it's like, will that offer come again? And sometimes they grab it. Maybe it's not the right option, but sometimes you just force into that corner and you've got to sign that contract. So for Dorigo, he's got so much time on his side, and that performance against his old club was really promising.
On Adelaide as well, I don't know what you made of their night. Obviously, Bart Vreens goes off very early in the game, and already inexperienced and mismatched kind of backline becomes, even more so with Jay Barnett coming on, not traditionally a centre back in any respect. It felt like they held out well. Obviously, they got the goal late on to make it competitive. I think I attribute that mostly to Seb Esposito just kind of getting his moment to step up a little bit wrong and allowing those numbers in behind. It just didn't feel like Adelaide were quite clicking, and they haven't really for the last month. But I don't know. I put it more down to the swings and roundabouts of football more than anything really.
Yeah, probably. And the Vren's injury didn't help as well, right? After 7 minutes he came off, you lose your shape, you bring on a sub after 7 minutes. It can be okay if it's an attacker, but for a centre back to be able to shuffle so quickly, you saw that last week. Actually, it was Brisbane who were on the receiving end of the bad luck against Adelaide right before kickoff. It spirals everything out of control, right? Because you've got to reset, coaches have got to tweak things around. It's not ideal at all. So I think the fact that they were sort of able to manage that well. Yes, they lost and conceded 2 goals, but I think all in all, this is a team who has pretty much struggled, right, to click, especially in that midfield in the final third in terms of, passes, trying to string passes together sometimes is,
I thought Craig Goodwin had a shocker, to be honest.
I was about to say
passes.
Too. Yeah, and it's sort of do you agree in the system that he's playing at the moment? Because it seems as though he's playing a bit more sort of centrally, like trying to get out wide and then drift in a bit. It feels a bit all over the place. Whereas his first stint at Adelaide, you knew what you're going to get, right? Out on the wing, cut back, cross into the box. He's able to score goals. It feels as though he's a bit lost in this system. I'm not quite sure.
It's tricky. Like he has always usually been just a winger, right? Now winger. And then, I felt like he was getting the ball a lot in wide areas. I didn't really notice him getting it too much in the inside until the kind of later portion of the game. But, Ayrton has wanted to use him in his 10, and that's a coach decision, right? It's like, where do you want to use your players? But also for Craig, I don't think he'd hate the challenge of it because in the back of his mind, he must be thinking, if I'm playing at the World Cup in, 7-8 months' time, this is the position I'm going to be playing in Popovic's system where his wingers play inside as well. So he definitely hasn't looked like the same Craig Goodwin that he was, 3 years ago in the A-League, where he was pretty much the player that Adelaide relied on to create their opportunities and score goals. But that's, that was a very high bar he set for himself.
Yeah, for sure. And I think for Goodwin coming back, one of the main goals was to make this World Cup squad, right? And I think he probably still would have made it if he stayed in Saudi, but again, better environment, knows the club inside out. It just, I don't know, for me, it feels as though it's a bit of a different system where he does want to play a bit more centrally. And you can tell it's bothering him a bit because he just feels more natural to be out wide, and it's where he feels most comfortable, right? It's where we've seen him thrive, and break the game open, be a difference maker. It's what he's been for Adelaide and the Socceroos over recent years. That's what he's known for. But at the moment, and it's not just him. I'm not just putting the blame solely on him, but he's obviously the big star attraction. Coming back to the club. A lot of people are relying on him, to be that difference maker. It just feels as though he's not quite suited yet in this role to be able to do that as he did when he was at Adelaide a couple of years ago. So I don't know whether things will change in terms of the tactics in the system. But interested to get Jacob's thoughts when he's on the podcast next time to touch on that.
Generally, when Adelaide start performing poorly, we invite Jacob sparingly because we know we're going to get a full spiel on it.
Exactly.
Just kidding. Love you, Jacob. Now, one other point from this game, and this is outside of the football. Now, just before we got to kick off, those in the North Terrace of the Melbourne Victory active supporter bay pulled up a couple of signs, and from my vantage point, there were 5 of them, Christian. They read, 10 years ago, we bossed the league. We finished 12th, average crowd down 14,386, 8 managers. Melbourne boys are not number 1. Now, this goes back to kind of what I've been talking about with Melbourne Victory the last 2 or 3 weeks, right? My perspective on them as a football club is that they are not doing big club things in terms of relevancy in the A-League. You look at someone, obviously throughout the history of the A-League, they've been compared directly with Sydney FC when players sign for those two clubs. They're told to say, I can't wait to play for the biggest club in Australia. And most people you can kind of nod on and go, yeah, okay, I can see where you're coming from. You look at the signing Sydney FC made, you look at the ambition, you look at their training facility and, their relevancy in Asia in the last few years. None of that is matched by Melbourne Victory at the moment. And this is part of the frustration of the Terrace. Obviously, the performances on the pitch have been, pretty terrible so far. Well, I should say the results, right? They're sitting 12th. We have said the performances in some games haven't been too bad. But the last 5 years, a few scalps in finals. You lost the last three finals. Yes, okay. If those 90 minutes on three occasions go a bit differently, then the fans probably feel differently as well, which is fine lines everywhere in football. But this is a longer term trend. It feels like for Melbourne Victory, you've got complaints off the field as well. The relationship with the active supporter group and the club has really fallen apart. You've got the monstrosity of the 777 partnership still. It looks kind of on the up now that they're kind of out of that pickle, but couple in the Christmas Derby invasion that's, almost coming on 3 years since that as well. The frustrations are clear from Melbourne Victory supporters. They're not what they used to be.
So they should be frustrated because it's such a massive club with such high expectations, and with that comes pressure. And over the past few years, they just haven't delivered. Probably, and it's harsh to say, right, because they've made back-to-back grand finals. Let's not forget, like if they won those two grand finals, we'd be having that same discussion. I mean, it's hard to say otherwise, right? Because he goes, okay, back-to-back champions, always well and rosy, right? But really, when you delve deeper into it, which you've been doing well, Lockie, and trying to highlight that and trying to remind people, they haven't really done much outside of that, right? A few, big games where they've won those, probably didn't expect to. For example, that Auckland two-legger last season, the semi-finals was a big scalp, considering the form of the two teams. Auckland clear favourites to win the championship outright, but they're one of those big clubs which perform, in those big moments, but to tie it together consistently throughout a whole season, sometimes it's a bit of a struggle for them. And look, in terms of the crowd, what was it, over 9,000 attendance for an original rivalry? You don't see that ever. I think that's a record for like the lowest attendance ever for a Victory Adelaide
outside of like game. COVID and affected games Besides like that. Yeah, it's the lowest home game for an original rivalry in Melbourne.
And even for me personally, it's like I'm attending these games and it's just telling myself it's just not the same vibe, not the same atmosphere as compared to maybe, I don't know, a decade ago when Kevin Muscat was in charge. There was such a different feeling around the place, right? You had 20,000 people, 22,000 people rock up to games against Newcastle Jets and Wellington Phoenix. Now we're struggling to hit a 10,000 mark against Adelaide, one of your biggest rivals in the league. So the interest has dropped off all around, and part of that has to do with how the club has been managed, I think, both on and off the field. You mentioned the 777 partners, and, the sort of debacle, if you can say, on that didn't quite work out 100%, obviously, and just a few other things where it's like, it just hasn't really turned Victory into that next level, and you have to keep adapting.
Yeah.
Right?
And I think it is important to say that obviously they're not the only one that is struggling with crowd numbers and connection to their supporters. This is a league-wide issue in a lot of places. And I was actually just thinking just before we came on, an observation was that when we got into COVID and that kind of kicked off all the financial issues and, losing the Fox deal and obviously the new Paramount one, all the distributions going down, that obviously hits clubs like Western United and Central Coast the hardest and first, right? Central Coast had those 2 great years, lost to their players, and even with all that success couldn't afford to replenish, and hopefully their ownership is going to get signed off early on in the new year is what we're hearing, but it's still a long road for them, and they got 1,900 to their game on Friday night against Auckland, and it is a league-wide issue, and it's tough because I think it's been in that place for so long where, we've seen what's happened to the Mariners. It feels like it's now really hitting the bigger clubs like a Melbourne Victory. Like this is the state of the game as a whole in combination with some of the club specific issues as well. Even the bigness or the size, whatever you want to call it, of Melbourne Victory is no shield anymore to the issues that everyone are feeling.
do they have a bit more control over that though? Like you mentioned before, and I've said this countless times in this podcast, you see the likes of Sydney FC going for these big marquee names. Victory, they're just not in it. They just don't seem to. I know they've got Juan Mata, obviously, but I'm talking about a real sort of in your prime, 30, 32-year-old, for example. You just don't see Victory going for those types of plays. I mean, who's the last type of high-profile figure Victory ever signed? It's probably Kazuki
Nani.
Honda. Or Nani, yes.
By profile, yeah.
By profile, yeah, Nani. In terms of actual, Nani obviously had a lot of injury issues coming in. It was a
on the
very
pitch
risky move. But on the pitch, you'd probably have to say Honda in terms of, yep, you know what you're going to get. This is the marquee player, which is going to really elevate us. And he probably didn't live up to all the hype, it must be said. But again, it's about that ambition. The same that Sydney show was like, where is that? I don't know. Are they in that much of a financial situation where they can't be in that discussion?
So Melbourne Victory, remember, and this is unique because they are a publicly listed company. The other clubs don't have to do this, but we saw Melbourne Victory's financial statements, and they lost $10 million operationally in the last financial year, which is significant. Now, they are under a model where, they're essentially share owned, so privately traded, but, they have multiple different share owners of their football club, where, I don't believe any club in Australia in the A-League level is run under that model. So obviously that's a uniqueness there. I wonder if, they've gone through a transition in leadership with Di Pietro as well. And I don't know. There's a lot of things behind the scenes that it's hard to point to, right? But it's clear there's an issue. And one other thing I wanted to talk about today, to be fair, a little later in the rundown, but I think we're kind of on the topic now. When we talk about crowd numbers, and I know it is a very frustrating topic in Australian football because we see what other sports in Australia can do, where we see what the A-League can do in the kind of 2016, 2017 peak areas, and we get frustrated at the state of the game and where it is now. And we see Central Coast Mariners, a club that has had so much success, won a continental treble no less than 2 seasons ago, pull 1,900 to their stadium for a Friday night fixture, is really, really disappointing more than most. It's no one in particular's fault. It's just a general sadness at Australian football that we're in this point. Staj, I really hope you're not listening to this one at the moment. But the comparison I want to draw, Christian, is the one between attendance figures and TV ratings. So if you want to make money, you got to spend money. And for the A-League to spend the money, they have to earn it. And in a modern environment, how do they earn it? And that's through broadcast deals. Yes, obviously, clubs are drawing money from people buying memberships, buying tickets, buying food at the stalls. But the majority of broadcast revenue for professional sporting leagues in the world at the moment, a big slice of that pie is broadcast deals. And we saw some stats. This is a post from Chris Shimizi on LinkedIn, who is the head of strategy at the A-Leagues. He posted a couple of stats about 2 weeks ago on some broadcast numbers coming through from Network 10. The 24-25 A-League season across the men's and the women's reached 5.1 million total national viewers. So that is unique people. So population of Australia is about 28 million. 5 million of those, or 5.1, watched the A-League at some point in the 24-25 season, which was also the biggest ever season on Paramount, which is probably nothing to write home about, to be fair. Obviously, when you compare it to the Foxtel days, who knows? But the early numbers from the 25-26 season is that normal TV on Channel 10 is up 31%, and streaming on Paramount Plus is up 48%. And they are not insignificant numbers, Christian. And we all had a big discussion about this during the week in the WhatsApp group. Your money comes from broadcast deals. These are strong broadcast numbers, at least in terms of increase. And when it comes to negotiation, obviously the current deal expires at the end of this season. And an increased broadcast deal can increase distributions, not all the way, but back to hopefully close to what they were. Provide some more cash for these clubs just to get back and pull the ceiling of what these clubs are up to a point where the Mariners still can go out and actually spend on some players and have a semi-normal transfer window. And that kind of disillusionment with the club doesn't hit that kind of really all-time low.
Yeah, you're spot on. I mean, it all comes down to the broadcasting deal. I mean, how many hot dogs can you sell at the end of the day, right? To be able to bring in that money. It's about the broadcast revenue and how many subscriptions you can get people to sign on to. I think that's the real key to be able to keep these clubs not only afloat, but to just keep them up and to survive and be able to use those funds to sign players, do this, do that. I mean, obviously the A-League has been in a position now for a while where it's just been such in a really sad and dire state where it's like, where do you turn to now? And I know, the APL have been trying to do stuff in terms of this Paramount deal, which people can disagree on, which if it was the right deal or not. But you've got talks. If I think what's the go with DAZN at the moment? I think you're a bit on top of that than I am.
So the rumors kind of over the last 12 months have been that the APL or Network 10 or some combination of the two, the preferred option would be a 2-year extension to the current deal under different terms. One is that is potentially more favourable for the APL, and that brings it in line with the broadcast deal for the national teams as well with Football Australia. And then after that, it's pure speculation, at least in a public sense, about what some other companies may be interested in. DAZN, who have bought Foxtel in Australia, are a big footballing distributor globally. They broadcast a lot of football leagues around the world. They now own Australia's biggest pay TV network that have the footy, that have the cricket. How does that play into things? Then you have obviously Paramount, the current broadcasters. They've just spent, I think, about £1 billion to get the UEFA Champions League in Europe, or to broadcast it in the UK, I should say. So that there's clearly money in the bank there. And then you have Stan, who have obviously jumped into the Australian broadcasting of the Premier League and the Champions League and all the UEFA competitions as well. So all of a sudden you have 3 broadcasters who realistically should have interest in the A-Leagues and hopefully are willing to spend money for it. And crucially, compared to the last time we did these negotiations, is that hopefully there's competition. So 1-on-1 is great. 3 parties that are potentially interested is even better. And hopefully that just bumps up the price.
Yeah, for sure. And I think also, and I'm probably going a bit off topic here from the broadcast, but a few days ago in the WhatsApp group, you sent a poll in to say what's hardest to convert in terms of, casual fans to hardcore fans. Or I forgot the number of options you gave. And what we said was converting, casual football fans to actually to watch A-League games. That's probably the hardest thing to do at the moment for us to try and grow our game. And you look at the crowd attendance figure, as you highlighted, the Mariners, only 1,900 people turn up for a home game on a Friday night against Auckland. Like, that is so disappointing. It just goes to show how much we've got to go. And this is a club who only won the treble a couple of seasons ago. So it seems as though, and Victory, another example, getting 9,000 against Adelaide, which we just spoke about. I think part of the problem is it's about how well these clubs are doing. I know it sounds so simple, but it can't be a case of you're selling out the Mariners Stadium and then 2 seasons later you're getting 1,900 at a game. So obviously there's a lot of casual fans there who are happy when your team's doing well, but when they're not doing so great, then you see those numbers fall off, but not just a bit, significantly. And I think that's a big worry. So it's about how do we convert those fans who might be interested in football, might watch a game here and there, to actually convert them to not even watch the A-League, just respect the A-League. You've seen people who just completely disregard it and say, there's no talent, it's not worth watching. How do you convert those football fans to fall in love with the A-League over time, essentially, and that will help build that number as well. So I guess that's that as well. And there's a lot of things, a lot of other factors that you can touch on which are contributing to those poor attendance numbers. But I've just seen time and time again, 3,000, 4,000 attendance. It's like, we've just dropped so far below. It's not even funny.
Yeah. So this is a survey that was conducted in the last 12 months or so. A little over 8 million Australians consider themselves football fans, of soccer. And the numbers that we just spoke about earlier, about 5 million have watched an A-League game over the last year. So obviously that's around 60%. It's not as high as you'd want it, but I don't think that's actually as low as a lot of people would think it would be. So the crucial part of it is then converting casual people who occasionally watch the A-League to actually invest in the storylines. and follow the league week in, week out, which is part of what we do here, is try and talk about those storylines. So it makes you want to come back every week and see what happens next. And it's a mission that's never going to end, and it's a very complicated one indeed. The next 6 months are going to be absolutely massive in terms of the future of the game, with the broadcast deal negotiations, with the CBA, with the players' union as well, is going to be a massive turning point. I'm flagging it now. So, look, sit tight and wait. It's going to be an interesting time. But we were talking about the original rivalry, of course, and Nikos Vergos, and you mentioned in there Keisuke Honda, previous Victory marquee player. It's funny, I actually had a thought watching the game. The ball that Juan Mata played in for Nikos Vergos, the header, felt very Keisuke Honda to Ola Toivonen for like the 3 months that we got of those two players playing together before Keisuke got injured and then COVID came. But yeah, really good service from Juan Mata. And you know who else gives good service, Christian? It is our friends over at Arrow Sports. A custom kit maker, of course. Adrian is the guy. He helped us make our Roundball Australia custom football jerseys, which we absolutely love. So if you are at a club, if you're a parent or a committee member or whatever, if you need a new kit provider, we can speak firsthand to the quality that Adrian does. We were in constant communication the whole way, making sure we had a design that we loved, making sure all the numbers worked out, and they got to us ahead of schedule as well, which was really nice. So if you want some new kits for your upcoming futsal or even winter season, whatever it may be, head over to arrowsports.com.au and you can use code ROUNDSBALL for free shipping as well on any order size. But let's jump back in to our A-League debrief. Let's go to Perth now. Christian, in the chaos time slot, a 1-0 lead for Ufuk Talay Sydney FC, which is sad for the Perth Glory. They're on this great run, 3 wins in a row. Griff, who it was reported that he's the permanent coach. I don't think that the club has still made any actual announcement on that, so we'll have to wait and see until that's officially confirmed. But I actually think this should be viewed in a positive light for Glory fans, because this is a game against a Sydney FC team who are top of the table. Yes, they don't have Joe Lolly and Paul Ocon, who are very crucial cogs to that machine, it must be said. But Perth were in this absolutely all the way, had many chances to score, should have scored, and they just, Christian, they kind of lost a game of football, as you do against a good side, which I think if you're a Perth Glory fan at HBF Park on Saturday night, you can kind of say, okay, we lost a football match against a good side. It doesn't feel like maybe what it's done in the last couple of years, where they rock up and they don't think they have a chance, and that's proven to them in the 90 minutes following. They were just in a good football match.
And they've been in the fight, right? And that's all you can ask, given Perth's situation over seems like forever now, right? Where they've just been, last in the table, second last, and just not competing, not fighting. And, there were some instances, I think a season or two ago, where they were losing games 6-7-0. It's like, okay, if you're going to lose a game, that's fine. That's football. But where is the spirit? Where is that, the sign that you actually care for the jersey? I think that's what fans have really been crying out for some time. And this game in particular, like, it was just a really good, fully a great contest in the end, where both sides, you could tell that they were in it from minute one to the end. And Sydney obviously got that early goal, which is a really good move, by the way, to open the scoring, which really, I guess, forced Perth to play it more openly. They just obviously couldn't find that goal, but it's not like, they didn't try and dominate the game. Sydney, I think, invited some pressure, which sort of probably goes to show why Perth, were on the front foot a bit more, which is understandable. But at the same time, I don't think Griffith should be, be disappointed by this performance. I know the result, obviously, at home isn't what they'd hoped for, given the few wins they've been able to pick up, which have been really impressive. But this shouldn't really put them on the back foot. This should be a sign to say, okay, Sydney are the league leaders. They've been arguably the most informed side in the competition this season, and we've basically gone toe-to-toe with them. We've lost 1-0. So I think those are actually positive signs for Perth, to take in for the next few weeks and to try and build on that. So I think that there's a lot of, obviously, positive signs to take from that. It's just, can they be a bit more lethal, a bit more deadly in front of goal? That's probably one of my concerns for this team. Taggart probably hasn't been his usual self, compared to what we usually know, what we get out from him. So if he can get that going, and if the pieces around Taggart can start to fire a bit more, then this can be definitely a dangerous side to contend with, and could probably beat any team at any given point in time. So Sydney in the end were just superior, more experience, even without those names you mentioned. To help Sydney get over the line, they got the job done away from home. Go back to Sydney with the 3 points. That's all that matters.
Yeah, of course, Perth will be sweating on the fitness of Adam Taggart as well. He was withdrawn, I think, just before the halftime break as well. So, look, in a couple of years ago, especially, like, Taggart almost won the Golden Boot in this Perth Glory side in the last couple of years, right? So, in the past, if he's gone down, you're thinking, oh no, what are they going to do? But I think that there actually is more pieces there. Tom Lawrence has, really proved. Maybe didn't have a lot to prove. I think, visa players just come into the A-League unproven, right? So naturally it feels like you have to see them do something before you say they're a good signing. I think it's safe to say he's been a good signing. He's done really well since the early little fitness niggle. Positive signs for Perth. Nothing to worry about for the Lion. I don't think, if we're sticking with that as his official nickname, Adam Griffiths. Hopefully he does get the full-time job. I think that'd be good. And for Sydney, I agree. I think to win 1-0 in a Perth away, a team that is flying at the moment, has the momentum behind them, to be able to score a goal early, hold on with a good defensive performance, have two of your best players in Lolly and Ocon, as I said, not in the team. When you hit those kind of low points in your season where, the natural variants of football are kind of going against you, and you can still pull out a win in that scenario, I think that's a great testament to the strength of them as a club. So, we said this last couple of weeks, but I have them and probably Auckland up with them, kind of maybe not running away with it, but definitely the top kind of two teams in the competition at the moment.
You can't say running away with it. At the start of the podcast, you said that it's such a tight competition.
I said the bottom 8 teams were very close. But if you look, there's kind of top two at the moment. I think Sydney are on 15 points. And then you got Auckland's back. Not 15, 18.
Sydney 18.
Sydney on 18, Auckland on 17. And then the Raw, who we'll get onto shortly, but I anticipate may just fall away just a little bit from their early strength. And that kind of leaves just those two teams on top. Yeah,
I think the depth as well is big. You can get Abel Wallity in there and score for you and be a difference maker when you've got Joe Lolly, you're the best player this season for Sydney, to sit out and to have that contribution from someone who probably wouldn't get that start. I think that's really key as well for this Sky Blues outfit. So I think Tale has a lot of things on his side. Can they just avoid the injuries? Obviously, no Asia to contend with, which is one of the excuses last season for them, which is probably why they argued that they missed out on finals, which for me wasn't an excuse given the talent and the depth they did have. Yes, they did have injuries to deal with, but they still should have made it. So, look, it looks as though on the basis of it, looking at the table, Sydney will well and truly make the 6. It's just, I think for them, the target now has to be winning this championship, given what we've seen from a lot of clubs. I mean, with all due respect to Brisbane, to be third in the table, it just goes to show that there can be a lot of drop points. I think Sydney have shown that they can be the most consistent so far, probably along with Auckland just below them. So I think those two, you're right, are probably just a bit head and shoulders above the rest of the chasing pack.
All right, what do you want to take us to next then? Maybe out of that pack, Brisbane, potentially. I know, look, I said to you before we recorded, I'm obviously referring to the Wanderers Brisbane 0-0 draw. I'm usually very diligent on, watching as many live matches as I can and then going back and at least watching the minis, like that kind of 20, 25 minute edit that Paramount do of every game. Because obviously, you want to be informed when you come on the show. But after hearing people online say that this was worse than MacArthur versus Victory last Friday night, I'm just like, I have to prioritize my time doing other things. It just wasn't going to happen. But you saw it live, so tell me what happened.
I don't blame you, but let me let you on in a bit of a secret about me. I love these types of games. I love the hard, gritty, tactical, defensive battles. I know it's not the purest type of football where most of the majority of football fans love to see. We live in this modern era where you play out from the back, you play this pretty tiki-taka football. Brisbane are obviously the complete opposite of that, right? Valkanis has come in and said, no, we're not having any of that. We're starting out from the back. We're trying to be defensively solid. You saw that last week against Adelaide where a moment of brilliance from Chris Long, that 95th minute winner, get the 3 points, get out of there. We don't care how badly we play. Yeah.
Just before you move on from that goal, we didn't mention this last week, but what a ball from Dean Bazanis. Like,
I know.
He got ripped on early in the season for just pumping it forward, like having the most final third passes in the whole team, right? But he gets them right on occasion, and that's all you need.
That's all you need. That's all Valkanis cares about. For most teams, the goalkeeper would have laid the ball on the ground, played out from the back, would have taken a minute for the ball to get across the other side, and then who knows what would have happened. So that directness from Brisbane, I think, is probably one of their underlying strengths, right? Something you probably haven't noticed as much, but in terms of this game against the Wanderers, look, there was just one clear game plan Valkanis had. It's like, I want this 0-0 draw. If we can nick something, maybe late, if we can push a few numbers forward, then okay, we'll take the win like we did against Adelaide last week. But I thought defensively they were superb, right? You can talk all you want about parking the bus, putting numbers behind the ball. I thought structurally, Valkanis has offered them just a new lease of life, right? In terms of that, they've struggled in that department for a long time now. Just to have that identity behind them, that backbone, I think has been crucial. For their success so far. That's why they're third in the table, right? They're not too open. They know when to attack. They know when to keep things tight. And just a special shout out as well to Lucas Harrington. I thought he was exceptional. He was everywhere, blocking balls, interceptions, in the right place at the right time. And he's only 18, a kid, 18 years old, to be able to put into environment a certain structure. I thought it was a really, really impressive performance from him. I thought he was a glue to that back line. And probably for me, I don't know who got man of the match officially, but I thought he was up there for sure for Brisbane. Just players like that, you can tell cohesively the unit is very much together. That's what you need when you want to play that style of football, right? My only one criticism of Brisbane, and I spoke to you about this, Lockie, pre-recording. If you watched, for any of you out there who watched the highlights package of this, the 3-minute highlights, there was not a single highlight of Brisbane. And that goes to show, attacking-wise, they did not care one bit. And you knew that, right? Like I said before, if they got a couple of chances from set pieces here and there, obviously that was their goal. But to create essentially nothing. I don't know what their XG was, but it must have been close to zero because they create close to nothing at all. And that's my one criticism, because it's all well and good to play that style of football. And the old saying goes that the best defenses usually win the titles, right? That's pretty much a fact across most leagues. But if you don't have players up there to score the goals and to be that final end product, then what's the point, right? You're going to be losing a lot of games 1-0, 2-0. So when they do advance and push numbers forward, like they did against the Wanderers on a few occasions, it's like you've only got one or two bodies up there trying to hold the ball, and you've got all these players trying to push up the field. By that time, it's too late, right? Wanderers are able to, they've got the players back, 3 or 4 man back line. They can regain possession and then go again. So I think Valkanis has to come up with a better game plan in terms of, counter-attack, push a couple of more players forward, take a few more risks, which I know is not what he wants to do, essentially. But at the same time, if you want to win games of football, that's what you have to do. You have to try and pick those moments where, we've got this 5 to 10 minute period where the opposition's on the back foot. We can really get at them. We can press a bit more. I feel as though Brisbane, once if they play a long ball, for example, it's like, they've got one player up there, and then by that time it's a bit too late. So I think if they can sort that out, then I think they're really in a good position to really cement a top 6 place. Again, very early days, but I really like what Valkanis is doing at Brisbane. At least they've got some sort of backbone to them, which is what fans have wanted for a while.
The thing I love about Michael Valkanis is how simply makes it just about winning. And like everyone talks these days, it's a big trend in, global football discourse. And we do this as well, of course, is, you can rub off a good performance with, a dodgy result, lucky goals here and there, a couple of defensive lapses, we'll get them next week. Well, that doesn't give you 3 points on the table. And Michael Valkanis, constantly hammers his point home, is that you got to find a way to win. And I actually love how simple it makes it. You got to find a way to win. And you can, I kind of love that we're going back in that direction where you just got to find a way to win. And I know there was some criticism of this game, and in terms of the league's already struggling, and you're not going to attract people playing football like this. I really don't think that's the club's responsibility. You see
Not
it
at all.
with Wellington Phoenix in the 23-24 season. Is it South Melbourne, right? So they've just won the championship. The coach that they had before, Sinisuke Hadjic, who just won them that trophy, an Argentine by the name of Esteban Quintas, he played some of the most dour football of all time, but took them to an Australia Cup semi-final, took them to NPL championships and Doherty Cup championships as well. Like, for the club, individual clubs, if you keep winning, and we're seeing this with the passion over at Suncorp, from the Den and their numbers, stadium is a separate issue, but in terms of their raw numbers, they're up. In terms of their, the passion of their active support, they're up. The club is feeling what Michael Valkanis is laying down at the moment. If he keeps winning, he keeps getting results, then that's kind of what they want.
Football's about different styles, right, Lockie? You could argue that if everyone played the exact same style of football, 4-3-3 attacking, wouldn't that be boring? It's good to have a bit of a mix-up where you've got a team like Brisbane who are prepared to shut up shop a bit more often than not. I know, yes, it's not pleasing on the eye for the purist football fan, but I'll go back to an example of your boy, Sis Fabregas, who used to play for Arsenal, who's coaching Como at the moment. They lost 4-0 to Inter Milan last week, and he comes out in the post-match press conference. He says to the media, he goes, "I would rather lose 4-0 than play bad football." And I'm thinking to myself, is that seriously your mentality? Like, you would rather play good football than win a game of... Is that making sense to me? I had to read it twice and think, did he actually say that? Is that a real quote? It was. And I'm thinking, this is the modern game. This is what we live in now, where we feel as though it's the only way we have to play football. It's just not. It couldn't be further from the truth. And I love coaches like Valkanis and Italiano for Phoenix who try and think outside the box and change up tactics week in, week out. At the end of the day, like you said, it's not the club's responsibility to entertain fans. If you love football so much, then you'd like any type of football, right? It's on the onus of the opposition.
It's a club's responsibility to serve their fans. So for a club like a Melbourne Victory and a Sydney FC, Sydney FC is actually the best example because their former CEO, Mark Aubrey, during their ACL2 run, they get to the semi-final and they lose and they miss the six, and he's giving an interview about the decision to hire Ufuk Talay and re-sign him to another contract. And part of this review process was ensuring that he delivered on the formational and tactical requests of the board. Some clubs do have those requests that they put on their coaches, but that's not what Brisbane Roar need right now. They don't need the Ange Postecoglou back right now. They need someone to show that their club is going to fight for them and they're going to win games of football. That is exactly what Michael Valkanis is doing.
Yeah, and you're right. Different clubs have their own unique way of looking at things, right? You touched on Postecoglou. He came into Tottenham specifically to play that open attacking style of football where you had managers like Antonio Conte and Jose Mourinho who are like the Valkanis type of manager, right? Who they just care about results and results only. Tottenham didn't want to go down that direction. So you're right. Clubs are different. It's how you want to set yourself up for both the short term and the long term. But for Brisbane, in this moment in time, it's about results, right? It's about getting your club up the table. Fans have been waiting so long now for just to make finals. I forgot when the last time it was. I think during the COVID era when about maybe 3-4 years ago when Brisbane last made finals. So they just want something. They want to see some wins on the board. They want to see results. And again, it just goes back to, exactly. It just goes to what does the fan want? And people have different opinions. Some people are like me where they like to see that style of football. Others no, they just want to see good quality football, entertaining 4-all draws. Okay, fair enough. But again, it's about, different opinions, different ways of seeing the game. That's what makes football the beautiful game, as they say, Lockie.
100%. And exactly like Chiefy, if he comes back next year and they're doing the same thing and they're losing all their matches, then the fans are going to turn. And that's football, baby. That's football. You can't get away with it forever. But let's go to Chiefy then. Wellington 1, Newcastle 3. And this, I talked about this last week, right? This could be a game where between two teams that have clear flaws in their system. Again, not necessarily a bad thing. You have trade-offs in systems, but the flaws are just so well known by everyone, right? And so exploitable. And Newcastle absolutely controlled this game. It is actually amazing to me that they didn't score 5 or 6 goals in this game. They had so many opportunities early that they should have tucked away before they even managed to get one on the board. They should have absolutely smashed the Phoenix. And don't forget, this is a team that at this point in time was bottom of the league, and Wellington have just lost 3-1 to them. A pretty good header from Eze to just claw back at least one goal. Could have been a 3-0. Could have been more. Could have been 5-0. To lose that game at home, again, bringing it back to the crowd numbers, their supporter base at the moment is not on this team at all. Wellington Phoenix really struggling. And Newcastle just, yes, it's not probably the greatest opponent to be able to say, they figured it all out. They're going to have more tough challenges to come, but this is a really important win for them.
A couple of things that would worry me from a Phoenix point of view if I was a fan of them, right? Number one is how quickly they crumbled. Jets scored about 3 goals in the space of 7 minutes coming out the start of that second half. That is not a Chiefy-like team at all in terms of structure, defensive stability. That went out the window, right? And then secondly, the high line. How high was their line for a couple of those goals? Lockie Rose, for instance, just went in behind Oluwayne.
That's what they're going to do. That's just the Phoenix way at the moment.
Got caught off his line. It's like, they've just lost their identity, right? Where, 2 seasons ago when Phoenix made that really good finals run, you knew what to expect, right? You didn't get scorelines like this where they were losing 3-1 away. Actually, I'll take that back because they lost to the Jets in that season, I'm pretty sure, where I think it was the only home loss of the season.
Sure.
So I take that back, but you know what I mean?
I understand what you're saying, but there's also the context of the season in the middle and Chiefy, losing the players that he did and struggling, and then coming out at the start of this season and saying, I kind of lost myself. I'm going to play the way I want to play. The way they played 2 seasons ago, yes, it got them results. Exactly like, it's very comparable to what Valkanis is doing at Brisbane right now. But the style of football was not loved after a full season of that. And you do that next season, then you start to lose and the players turn. So Chiefly did have to reinvent himself. And you say they've lost their identity. It's an attempt at a revolution, right? They're trying to evolve the style and bring something new. So far, it's not working. But in terms of this season in isolation, you do know what you're getting. Unfortunately, the thing that you do know is that Wellington Phoenix are going to concede because of their high line.
Well, maybe he's not as comfortable playing that system. Like, yes, he's forced to make those changes, Chiefy that is, but is that a sign that maybe he's not the right man for the job? Maybe it's a time to part ways at the end of the season, because you can tell he's a more pragmatic manager. You see that with his insights and his press conferences and just how he breaks down the game. It's really good. I don't know. Is he more comfortable playing this new style of football now? Is he capable of getting results consistently week in, week out? Or is it, I don't know. What do you think?
This is definitely what he wants to do. There was an interview he did. It was a post-match at Amy Park. I think it was after a Melbourne City game a couple of years ago. And a mate of mine, Caden Foley, asked the question. He was talking about like what kind of football, down the track in your ideal world do you want to play? And he talked about like a Roberto De Zerbi at the time who was managing Brighton, and the really expansive, aggressive passing version of football, which is very much not what the Phoenix was at the time. But like the line where you say he's pragmatic, I think that comes from moments like that where he's talking about, well, actually, with the playing squad I have at the moment, they're not quite capable. So I'm doing the thing, I have Costa Barbarouses, who is lightning in transition, and I have good defenders, so I'm going to play a transitional game. That was kind of what worked, right? Whether he's playing this high line and, really high possession game because that's what he thinks the players that he has are capable of, or that's just the thing that he wants to do, maybe those two lines are getting a bit blurred. But I wouldn't describe him as a... Maybe he's pragmatic in terms of the players that he has, not necessarily in the style of football. Like, he shouldn't be pigeonholed into that style. We're seeing that this season. But maybe, I don't know, is he going a little bit further than what his players are capable of this season? Maybe that's the issue.
Potentially. And again, in the off-season, we spoke about the lack of transfers, and potentially he didn't get quite what he wanted in terms of the player profile and personnel to be able to play this new style of football. I don't know. So maybe it's a case of giving him that extra season, but I don't think he has that amount of time. I think this season is it's basically this or bust, right? Because where are they on the table? I think they're outside, like eighth on the table. Someone trying to check.
They're in that pack. Yeah,
they're in that pack. Oh, sorry, they're second last. They're 11th. But like 4 teams are on 8 points. So I thought they were a bit higher than that. So again, it's really close.
Well,
but
at the start of the weekend, they probably were.
Yeah, exactly. It's that tight. But again, it's about the objective and the goals that the board have set out for him, right? We obviously don't know those discussions behind the scenes, but he's obviously has a set target, right? Given last season what happened, missing out on finals after the great run they had the season prior. I don't know. And for me, it feels as though Italiano is a coach who doesn't need that much time to adapt, right? I mean, he had when he first took over as manager of the Phoenix, he had that full off season to work with his players and to be able to implement those ideas straight away. And these players were fully on board. It's not like he's one of those managers where he needs 1 or 2 seasons to really, get himself off the ground and running. So again, yeah, it's a tricky one. I'd love to see him have a bit more time because he's one of those managers who you feel has so much potential just with his insider knowledge. I don't know. It's maybe a case of just the wrong squad. Probably, I don't know, maybe as simple as that. But yeah, interesting to see where they lie on the table come season's end.
It will be, and I know I've said this before, but I wonder how much the fact that Chiefy is just so open about that side of the game with media changes how we perceive him. I'm not sure. Like, I don't know. Is there a reason that the other coaches don't share that much of their tactical, ideas and knowledge, and maybe part of the Wellington Phoenix preview for a game you're playing in 6 days' time is to watch the press conferences and watch Chiefy explain his tactics. I'm not sure. But yeah, look, I don't think they're ever going to get rid of him before the end of the season. As we say, it's so tight. You can go on a good run here and there and make finals. So I'm pretty sure he'll be given the full season to at least see it out. So I think he's on a 1+1 year deal, right? So it would just be a case of Wellington kind of saying, we're not going to take that up. But hopefully it turns around for Chiefy and the Phoenix. Final game of the round, a 3-0 win to Auckland. Reading that wrong. One of the goals was actually for Central Coast Mariners. A lovely header from Callan Elliott, though, one of the all-time A-League own goals. It was just such a quality finish. And my absolute favourite part of this goal, Christian, is the fact that Storm Roo's coming down the right and he bends in the ball. He clearly sees that Callan Elliott is going to get to it first and he turns his head to walk back to his position. And then he hears the rustle of the net and he hears the cheers and he turns around and they're all celebrating and he's going, what? Like he actually stops dead and he's so confused. He can't believe that ball that was clearly going to be cleared away by a defender has ended up in the back of the net. It was my favourite moment of the whole game.
Crazy stuff. And it's not Elliott's fault, right? I mean, his body position, you get in those situations where it's just, you get it all wrong, right? And there was only one way that ball was going to go in the back of his own net, which is a real shame. It was just absolute comedy. I'm trying to think back. Is that the best own goal ever scored in the A-League? Probably not. There's probably been a better one scored than that. Just off the top of my head, I can't really think, but we have to compile a top 10 of own goals in A-League
Maybe
history.
we do. We need to go look at some of the best A-League own goals.
Go back into the archives. That'd be pretty cool. But I think from there, once it was 1-1, still, I just thought Auckland, you could just tell the second goal was coming, right? And, came, I think, 10 minutes into the second half where, they were in control, got that goal. And then from there, they were able to see out the game. But if you're talking about Auckland, they're just not the same as last season in terms of they just have more of these moments where they're letting opposition back into games all of a sudden. I don't know if you're getting that same feeling. They just don't look as convincing. I think that's the right word to use this season. They're just, giving teams more chances. Defensively, I think they've probably slacked off a bit. In saying that, they're still very good. I'm just saying for the high standards they set last season, you're just not getting that same sort of consistency that you did a few months back. I don't know, that's probably fair to say for this Auckland side.
100%. And I think it really is just them being an extraordinary A-League team last season, and then you lose Alex Paulson, you lose Sakai through injury for a good portion of the start of this season, and then a really awesome team becomes a really good team. You know, a really good team in the A-League allows a few chances every week. That's just kind of the nature of it. So I see it more as a kind of reversion to the mean of what should be expected. But I think you're right, because of the high expectations that we saw last year, you kind of go, oh, what's happening at Auckland? And then you look at the ladder and see that they're still in second. You go, oh, okay, no, they're actually all right.
Yeah, exactly right. And that's the problem you get when you bring those high standards up, right? You have to achieve those expectations. And had an incredible, outstanding season, under the inaugural campaign under Corica, and you lose those couple of players, as you mentioned. Sakai obviously coming back a week or two ago, back from that long-term injury. It's going to be. Look, I still think Auckland and Sydney are the teams to beat. Just their experience, the two coaches in particular, they know the style of football that they want to play, and the players seem to fully buy into it. So it wouldn't be panic stations too much if I was an Auckland fan, but just seeing that difference is quite interesting to me, comparing those two seasons. So again, we're not even halfway through this season, so things do change, and we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I mean, like even then, you see a couple of, shakier performances. Their only loss for the season was against the Newcastle Jets, where the ball, pinballed around three players and spat out to LA Rose in a one-on-one with Michael Vowd and tucked it away. So, I think no cause for concern for Auckland, really. They're a very good football team. I think they'll tick along just fine. Just before we end the show, we do want to mention we're recording this kind of late Sunday night. We've just, I'm sure you know a lot more than what we do, but we've just seen the kind of first reports of the Bondi shooting come through in the last couple of hours. And look, we were talking about it before we hit record. We don't really know too much about what to say. I guess we kind of just want to express our sadness at what we've seen, at least so far. I think we know at this point 3 dead are confirmed, and potentially more. So hopefully that's not the case.
Can I just jump in there, Lockie?
Sure.
It's actually confirmed now that 10 people have died. So that's
okay.
Everyone's reporting that. So just really sad scenes. Just prayers for everyone.
Yeah, horrible. I mean, Port Arthur was 35, 45, somewhere in that range, and this is not a number that's far away from that. So obviously a very, very sad day in Australian history. So our thoughts are obviously with everyone affected, and hopefully that number does not increase over the coming days. But that will do for this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. Christian, thanks for your time tonight. Thank you everyone for listening at home, and we'll see you next week. Goodbye.